Hey guys, it's Shannon, and this is going to be a really personal video talking about struggles with different types of addictions. And today we're going to be talking about food addiction, and I'm going to talk to you about how embracing an addiction-based theory of weight loss helped me to lose a tremendous amount of weight and to keep it off. My husband and I have both lost a tremendous amount of weight in the last several years. We lost around 100 pounds each, and we both gained back about 20 of that over the course of a couple of years. And so on balance, we've lost and kept off about 80 pounds each. I've also, in the intervening years, had a child, and I'm breastfeeding currently. We've managed to, for the most part, on balance, keep this weight loss off for a lot of reasons, but I think fundamental to all of these for me has been the realization that I am a food addict. And this is like a hard thing to say out loud because it's such a taboo concept. Addiction has such a negative connotation in our society. And I have never personally struggled with alcohol or drug addiction or anything like that. I've never had any interest in drugs. I've never tried any drugs, even marijuana. And, I drink casually starting in college and until into my early adulthood. But despite being drunk, a handful of times, I was never really interested in alcohol and it didn't have an addictive pull on me. So, for me, who's pretty much the quintessential good girl, to say I'm an addict about anything is really disconcerting. But I realized through a program called Bright Line Eating initially, which is a wonderful book, and you should check out all the summaries and resources I have on this channel about my initial weight loss using that program. The book, she lays out how sugar and flour can act in an addictive way. I think I used to think that substances were either addictive or not. Drugs were really addictive, so if you tried them, you would become addicted. And I don't know how I reconciled that with alcohol. It was like a binary thing. What I didn't realize is that what's addictive for one person might not be addictive for somebody else, which explains why I can have alcohol without really having any sort of pull to have more alcohol. In fact, whenever I did get drunk, I was always like, ugh, I don't want to drink ever again. This is terrible. But someone like my grandmother could be an alcoholic, and my grandmother was alcoholic. And in fact, there's a lot of addiction in my family. And I'm going to get emotional talking about this, but my little brother is a heroin addict. And he's homeless. And my cousin was a drug addict. He has since passed away, not of drugs, of pneumonia, but very young, he passed away. And his sister, my other cousin, has also been addicted to drugs, as was their mother, my aunt, who I never met because her addiction to drugs, and almost certainly her addiction to love and her addiction to romantic intrigue, pulled her away from her family. And she had a lot more kids, I would assume, some of which also are very troubled. So addiction runs in my family. It's really hurt my family. So the idea that I might have the propensity to be addicted to things wasn't news to me. And in fact, I think when I was a kid, this thread of self-preservation really listened during, DARE and dare to keep kids off drugs and all these, little talks that you get when you're a kid about drugs and alcohol. And I think even then I could tell that my grandma wasn't an alcoholic. My little brother was obviously a child, but I knew that my aunt had struggled with drugs, and I knew that my cousins who were older than me had struggled. But in general, I think I just had this sense that like, oh man, like when I like something, I really like something, I seem to like things that I like more than other people. So I had a little bit of a video game addiction as like a 10, 12, probably 12-year-old, where I was really, really obsessed with like The Legend of Zelda and other video games, but particularly that one. And I just couldn't stop thinking about beating it. And I got all the cheat guides, and I would like fake being sick so that I could stay home and just play video games. And looking back now, with all the learning that I have, I can see that that is a maladaptive coping strategy, right? My brain wasn't comfortable dealing with discomfort and stress, and I was going through a lot of that. My parents were very unhappy. I have another brother who's extremely handicapped, who suffers from massive health issues. There was a lot of like pain and chaos, and a lot of love too, but a lot of pain and a lot of chaos and a lot of unpredictability and a lot of uncertainty and instability in my childhood home. And looking back, I can see that video game addiction was like kind of like the first sign that I might have an addictive personality. And then I got to high school and I would develop these crushes, but they would be like crazy infatuations, like way more boy crazy than than my friends. And I was at a boarding school that was really far from home, and my parents were undergoing a divorce. And so I had a lot of discomfort that I didn't know how to deal with. And I found that just fantasizing about some white knight who was gonna come in and save me was like so much more fun to think about. And it wasn't even a conscious thing. It was just like my brain would grab onto that romantic fantasy and like go with it and just create these like novel situations where like, what would I say and what would he say, and like, how would I get him? And I was drawn to people who were like not really into me. Now I can look back at this and I can say, like, this is pretty classic love addiction. It's like someone who has what's called attachment wounding or an insecure attachment style as a result of their early childhood. And for me, this is not a dig on my parents, who were very loving and wonderful people and who were doing their best. When I was born, my parents were like 28 and they were going through some financial difficulties. They were just starting their lives. They had a lot of student debt. There was a lot of stress. I think I had about 1 year where things were pretty wonderful, and it was a honeymoon. It was the oldest child. It was just me. I received a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of attention. And then they had a child who was multiply handicapped. And so that was like a big transition for me as a baby, right? I had my parents, they loved me, they were wonderful. And then I was the child that was okay, so I just had to be okay because my brother was so special needs. And I remember feeling this enormous need to take care of him, and like totally unprepared to do so because I was just a year older than him, but this like tremendous protection instinct to care for him but also like, you know, being told at like 3 or 4 that your brother might die. You should prepare for that. You should prepare for that possibility. When I was like 5 or 6 or 7, it was 7, I think, he was actually removed from our house and put into a group home, and so it was very sudden. That was like really difficult for me to understand and process. And so I have all these things in my past that caused me to have a somewhat like insecure attachment style, which is like when you can take a quiz to see what your attachment style is, but there's secure, there's insecure, there's anxious, avoidant, which are both types of insecure attachment, and then there's one more, but I have like an anxious attachment style where when I'm in a relationship, even or a friendship too, it's like I want more and more and more intimacy and love and connection, and I tend to be drawn to people who are not interested in giving it to me and wanting to like win their love. So anyway, this is all signs of a addictive personality, which is we're talking about kind of stems from these early attachment issues. These are 2 examples of like maladaptive coping skills. And I never really turned to food because food was not really, I think I probably would have, but it wasn't really in my control as a child. So I didn't turn to food as a child, and I was very active in a lot of sports as a child, so I didn't have any issues with my weight then. But I started to in high school. Like I was at a boarding school, I had a dining hall, I could choose my own choices. And so I started gaining weight in high school and turning to food as a way to deal with my underlying stress and emotions. And then that continued into college when I stopped rowing, I stopped exercising and playing basketball and soccer. I think I realized through the book Bright Line Eating and all this learning that I've done about attachment and attachment theory and struggling to understand addiction in the context of trying to deal with having a brother who is like so far gone that it's a goodbye at this point. So this has all shaped my understanding about how addiction works with us and the sorts of things that can be addictive. And so there's this whole category of other addictions other than drugs and alcohol, like behaviors. So a good example is the video game addiction. I think some people, particularly young men, struggle with porn addiction. Like love addiction is a thing. It's this idea that like you can't stop thinking about this person, and it's oftentimes someone who's not good for you and is not interested in you, which is a desire to like recreate the childhood, like the chaos that you felt in childhood. It's like a desire to like, you know, fix that as an adult. We try to fix our early childhood relationships in like romantic relationships. Seeking people who just weren't interested in me and trying to convince them to like me was a lot like when my parents loved me very much, and they could be like really loving and wonderful with me, but just so often they were consumed by their work and their own stress in their lives. And in particular, they were consumed by taking care of my brother, who rightfully needed more caregiving than me. Like this overwhelming urge to like perform, to like be good enough, to have somebody love you and just focus on you. It's this human need. So like synthesizing all this, I started to realize that there are people in this world who can have like a thing of Godiva chocolates on their desk for a week and just eat like one every couple days. And there are people in this world who can go to a pizza party and can have like a half slice of pizza or a slice of pizza. But I am not that person. Like, I'll eat it in a day. If someone gives me a pizza, I could probably eat almost the whole thing before I would feel full. I have a really hard time confronting the stresses of everyday life without reaching for a food crutch. When I was a junior associate at a big law firm in a very stressful working environment, I would feel like, okay, I have to work on this assignment, it's 9 p.m, I'm just getting started, oh fuck, it's due tomorrow, oh shit, like what am I gonna do? Okay, you know what, I better go downstairs and get something to eat. And I think I framed it as like, I need something to eat in order to do this work. But really it was like, I'm realizing that I've got something on my plate that feels insurmountable, and I am feeling really deeply uncomfortable about that. And so obviously, like, when I was stressed, I was eating like mac and cheese and like things that were like really high pleasure foods to make me feel better, to deal with this like overwhelming discomfort of something that was stressing me out and making me uncomfortable, because I never really learned how to turn and face my fears and turn and face stress. And like, the thing that's gonna actually make me feel better is to sit the fuck down and do this work that I have to do. That'll make me feel really better. But for me, the stress felt so insurmountable, and the pull of something that lit up the reward centers, all that dopamine in my brain, felt so much better. It's like an alcoholic, like, oh, I need a drink to deal with this. So I understood that with alcohol, but I didn't hold myself to the same standard with food. And I think that's how you get, you know, me 100 pounds heavier than I should be, turning to food to cope with the stresses of everyday life. So the program Bright Line Eating sets out a sort of, it's based on the 12-step tradition, which is, as you guys probably know, like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. It's based on Overeaters Anonymous, which is like, we don't do these things ever. We don't have sugar, we don't have flour, we have defined meal times, and we measure and weigh our food. And these are the 4 tenets of Bright Line Eating, and these are the promises of her recovery. And for me, that worked really super well to lose a bunch of weight. I combined it with plant-based eating, and it was like a 1-2 punch, and I felt amazing. I've done like intermittent fasting. I'd still do some intermittent fasting. I think it's a great program, and I continue to practice some of the tenets of it. So I don't eat sugar. That's just something I don't do. I actually have like really adverse effects when I have sugar now. Like I get like headaches and I feel really amped up, and I can just notice such a difference in my behavior. And then I have a huge crash and I feel like terrible. So I can see what an addictive property it has on me and how bad it is for me. I don't drink alcohol. I think the last time I had alcohol was like 3 years ago on my birthday, and I felt terrible afterwards. And I just only had like 2 drinks, and I just like felt like a headache, and then I crashed. It affected me the same way sugar affects me, and so I just don't like it anymore. It's crazy. And you can see this video I made about 10 things I wish I knew when I was fat. I talk about the way that your brain changes, and how the things that you love now, you won't always love if you change your behavior. You will actually come to enjoy other things. Like I enjoy salad now, which I never did before. I enjoy all these other things. Like my body has changed. I do sometimes have flour, and it is a problem for me. It doesn't give me as bad of like a withdrawal as sugar. Like it doesn't give me a headache. It doesn't give me the jitters. I just really like it, and I tend to gravitate towards it when I'm stressed. I don't do defined meal times all the time now, and I don't weigh and measure my food. And when I do, I really slim down. But I'm at a healthy weight right now. My BMI is a healthy weight, and I'm not like super fussed about that. And so I've relaxed those lines within the Bright Line Eating program. But what I really want to do is I want to heal my addiction and sort of heal the wounds that my inner child carries really deep in my heart. My relationship with John is helpful with that, because John is a very securely attached person who is able to like calm me down and calm my nervous system. My relationship with Ellie, our daughter, is helping with that, because in parenting her, I'm getting way more in touch with my own inner child, and I'm remembering things that I had totally forgotten, and I'm sort of making peace with them. My understanding of the stress and difficulties that my parents faced a lot more. Like I can appreciate that I am in a very different educational, emotional, financial support based system than my parents were when they had us. They were young and broke and alone and facing tremendous difficulties. And I'm much older than my parents were when they had me, and I can't even imagine dealing with the sorts of things that they had to deal with when I was a kid. So empathy and like understanding and trying to reconcile what happened with me and what happened with my brother, who unfortunately has, a lot of the same attachment issues that I do, and has chosen to turn to really hard drugs to deal with his discomfort and to deal with his pain. The goal is healing. This video has ended up being a little bit more than about just food addiction, but I think the point that I'm trying to convey just through sharing my own experience is that addiction is a multifaceted concept. It's not like a black and white thing. Please comment down below. This has been a really personal video. I would love to hear about your thoughts on it and your struggles with food addiction or other types of addictions, and what works for you and what's helped your healing. And if this video spoke to you, please give me a like and click subscribe. Until next time, do well and always make things better.